The views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are our own, or those of our guests, and in no way represent the views of the companies, associations, or organizations that any of us may work for. All stories, events, or tales shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner in which they are told. They may or may not have even happened at all. The details have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. This is Squawk Ident.
You're listening to Squawk Ident, an aviation podcast that explores the many pathways to an aviation profession, the challenges that a professional aviator can expect in today's marketplace, and we share many stories along the way. I'm your host, Aviator Tony, a professional airline pilot currently flying for a U.S. legacy carrier with close to 20 years on the flight line. This is episode 74 of Squawk Ident, recorded on the 25th of March, 2020. From the Aviator Sound Studios from somewhere in Southern California. On today's show, we are honored to be joined by an inspiring aviator and Gold Seal CFI. She's an aircraft owner and president of the AeroValley Flying Club. She is the co-host of the hit YouTube channels Taking Off and In the Hangar, where together with her co-host and fellow pilot Dan Millican, they have produced over 100 episodes over 4 seasons. She is a longtime resident of Lantana, Texas, where most of her neighbors know her as the president and co-founder of a local nonprofit, Lantana Cares, which is dedicated to resident-empowered beautification, education, and recreation. To help me kick off today's show is a superb aviator and co-host. He is a former international and professional racquetball champion, a member of the 9G Club, an AMP and avionics tech and RC aircraft commander, a boat skipper, a commercial drone operator, and currently a 737 pilot for Legacy Airlines, the name we use here on the show as an alias to our employer, a U.S. mainline carrier. From his remote studios in Austin, Texas, where he has survived the DFW tornado warnings and severe weather. Please help us in welcoming back to the show, Mr. Rob D. Rob, how you doing?
Hey, Tony. It's good to be back, man. It's been a while. I'm alive.
You survived. I was getting a little worried about you.
I got to tell you, it was a little bit exciting last night with the family and the tornado warnings. We were watching the weather closely, as most of us do in Tornado Alley this time of year. And we were watching TV and we heard the tornado sirens start to wail. And next thing you know, you hear, both my kids and the dogs come like flying down the stairs like, oh my God, we got to get into the shelter. Yeah, there was a lot of that too. We heard a little bit of hail hitting the windows and it got exciting. So we went into the, they recommend going into the lowest level of your house and getting into, one of the most smallest rooms, which happens to be a half bath downstairs. So we all huddled in there and I got a little iPhone with our TV on there. So I watched the news on there and we're in there for a good half hour, 45 minutes before, we figured there was all, the all clear. So, that was all 9-10 o'clock last night.
Crazy. What a way to finish off coming back from vacation.
Right.
And Rob and I actually crossed paths in Honolulu last week.
That's right.
And it was so cool he's like, yeah, I'm going on vacation. I'm going to Waikiki. I'm like, I'll be in Waikiki. So, 2 podcasters and his family, forget about it.
Yeah, that was awesome, man. That was we had to take that opportunity to get together like that and introduce you to my family. So that was a great opportunity, and we were happy to, see you and meet you.
Yeah, it was great, and it was great to see Hawaii really kind of getting back up to speed. The beaches were packed.
Oh, it was great.
Not that I was on the beach. Let's just make that perfectly clear.
Right.
I was out exercising when I crossed paths with Rob.
Right. You were. So, you had your running shirt on, your running hat, and your AirPods. You were ready to rock and roll.
That's right.
But I, on the other hand, I was ready to go to the beach.
Yeah. So, no, I'm glad you're safe and had a safe flight and journey last night. And again this morning. You were right back out this morning.
That's right. Yeah, I had to fly another trip today. Because of the Hawaii vacation, I had to rearrange my schedule. And what ends up happening is you load up the back half of your schedule just to make some time for that vacation. So I have 2 trips back to back, and I'm on the second half of that one. So
yeah,
it's gonna be a long 4 days.
Yeah. Well, welcome. Well, also here joining us today to help get Flight 74 of the Squawk Ident podcast underway is another exceptional aviator and co-host. He's an award-winning trophy-hoisting tennis champion, a professional CFI, II, and MEI flight instructor, a former freight dog, a former airline pilot, a current King Air instructor, a Falcon 2000 commander, and a captain and corporate operator as well. He joins us from his oasis of chaos, where he is again sharing his only day off this week from an enormous amount of flying from somewhere in San Diego, California. Please help me in welcoming back to the show, Captain Roger. Roger, how you doing?
I'm doing all right, Tony. How about you?
Can't complain. I've been flying quite a bit. I was kind of feeling...
Have you?
Feeling kind of tired and run down, and then I had some communications with you and texting about the show schedule, and I don't feel bad anymore. You've been flying.
Yeah, I feel like I'm a broken record, the feast or famine thing, except it's been a continuous feast of work lately, and I just can't seem to get away from it. But as I like to say, my job security looks really good.
Oh, that's excellent.
So, that's a whole lot better than a lot of other people can say. And so I choose to look at the positives most of the time.
Yeah. Well, the only downside is you haven't gotten much done on that remodel, have you?
I have not gotten much of anything done. I did caulk some baseboards the other day, and that was about it. That's been the cumulative effort on my behalf for, 4 weeks, 5 weeks now.
Yeah.
It's all kind of running together. I'm not really sure anymore.
Yeah. Well, we were going back and forth about the different types of caulk, and we were talking about how I finished my final bathroom remodel. The house is now officially complete on the inside, and I used the wrong type of caulk, and non-paintable, which anybody that's had to deal with that, I used what the manufacturer of the surround and the tub that I installed recommended, the 100% silicone. And I thought, well, it's going to be fine. I'll do a nice, neat line, and then no.
That's the whole paint, does it? Beads up on it or whatever.
Yeah, it beads up. So I was watching a lot of YouTube videos on how to paint over non-paintable caulk.
Step 1, remove caulk.
Yeah, there was a grinder involved. Yes. So it's good to see you guys, and I'm so excited about today's show. So now that we've got our pre-flight complete, let's get ready to push off the gate, start those virtual podcast engines, and get Flight 74 of the Squawk Ident podcast officially underway. I'd also like to give a big thank you to Captain Kevin Elmore for joining me on episode 73 last week. We got to fly together after quite a bit of time since we've flown together last, and his mentorship, his wonderful words about leadership, being a mentor, it's very inspiring. Every time I get a chance to sit down and talk with Kevin, I am really impressed with his journey and how much he gives back to the aviation community and to his peers as well. So thanks again to Kevin for joining us on episode 73. Well, we are very excited to have our next guest on the show. Her journey is both inspiring and filled with ongoing opportunity. From somewhere in Lantana, Texas, without further ado, please help us in welcoming to the Squawk Ident podcast, Miss Christy Wong. Christy, how you doing?
I'm doing good.
All right. So, I came across your social media feed probably, I'd say about a year ago. And I thought, all right, here's another Instagram person that's a flight instructor that's out there with really cool, photos of her with the airplane and with students. And what really caught my eye is all those pictures that you had put up with your students. There was a common theme that I noticed, which was you really enjoyed watching them grow. And that really spoke to me. So after a little while, I decided, well, I need to get her on the podcast. And it was through Kyle Jensen, who has been on the show a couple times. And he said, you really should reach out to her. I think she'd come on your show. And I did. And I was really so happy when you said, yeah, I'll come on the show. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks. I'm happy to be here. This is my very first podcast.
All right.
All right. Welcome.
The first one that I've agreed to. So.
Well, welcome. And we're so thrilled that that lasted a long time.
Hey, shut them up.
Oh my God.
They're really excited to have you, Christy.
That lasted forever. No, we are very excited to have you here today. As I was doing my research on having you on the show, I texted you yesterday. I said, wow, just talk about a journey. And we have similar kind of journeys, whereas we started flying a little later. Second career for me, I was 10 years into my first career and when decided, hey, enough. It's been
same.
The sky's been calling. It's either now or never, But your journey started out at a very young age. Can you tell me a little bit about what sparked that initial desire to be flying?
Absolutely. My grandfather, when I was about 4 years old, he gave me a book. It was just a little pocket reference guide of airplanes. And this was in the mid to late 80s. So, I loved that book. My favorite airplane was the DC-10 in that book. There were some GA aircraft and stuff, but what really drew me to it was the airliners. And I wore that book out, and I just always had this weird fascination with airplanes. I can't even describe it. And I didn't even grow up around airplanes necessarily, but when I saw one, I stopped and stared, as most aviators do. I didn't really grow up in areas where we had a lot of air traffic. I was out in, born and raised in Southern California, but it wasn't like in metro areas. I was born in the LA area, but we moved to the high desert. And so again, no airplanes. Then moved to Arizona, Western Arizona, no airplanes. And so when I did see an airplane, it was just this big deal. Finally moved to Las Vegas right after high school to go to college there. And I found myself pretty much glued to the airport. There's a little sitting area at McCarran Airport. And I would actually go out there and just spend hours listening to air traffic control and watching the airplanes land while trying to study. That was, I don't know how to describe it other than that. There was just a very early fascination with aviation and airplanes in general.
Yeah. And that's really cool that you would hang out on the observation deck area of the airport there to watch these airliners come in. How did you get any studying done?
It was really hard. Usually it was in between, like obviously there's pushes. And so a lot of times it was in between the busy push times. I would actually, I remember I'd go down to Taco Bell on the corner, grab Taco Bell, come back, sit, and then just sit there and try to study while listening to air traffic control and try to make sense of what they were saying. Because of course I had no lessons, in flying or anything. And so I was trying to piece together everything while studying science and the things that I was focusing on in college.
Yeah. So you were at UNLV, graduated in 2007, and you got a job as a teacher at a very young age. That must have been a pretty intimidating thing to do, especially at the grade level where you were teaching.
Yeah, I needed a job. And so they were doing emergency certifications to bring on teachers. And so you had to go through this whole interview process to get that certification, which I did. And I started teaching science. And my first year of teaching was high school. And I was like 22, 23, and my students were like 18, 19. And it was pretty intimidating because these were kids that were effectively my age. And so that lasted a year. And then after that, I decided to teach fifth grade. And I did that for the next 2 years. Just, really, I just needed a job. I never really, like, I don't know how to say this. Like, I never really grew up like, oh, I want to be a teacher. But it was just one of those things where there was such a need for teachers. And I saw a quick and easy career path, I guess. Mm-hmm. But science, I've always loved science and I've always been drawn to it. So when I moved to Texas, I taught for one more year and then decided to go back to grad school.
I see. And so awesome. You ended up going to the University of Texas, graduating.
UNT.
Yeah. And you graduated in 2011. And is that where you got the education needed to become a clinical allergy specialist? What can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So I wound up getting a job. I actually was going to go to medical school. I decided I wanted to be a doctor. I love science and physics and medical biochemistry. And so I decided to put that all together and why not be a doctor? And as I got into medical school, realized very quickly that was not what I wanted to do. I preferred the science aspect of it. Not that I didn't like working with patients, but there's also a lot of politics and corporation, stuff, health care insurance and whatnot that they really don't teach you in med school, but you're kind of expected to know about. And just decided I'd rather work in industry. And so that's what I did. I got a job with my prior company as a clinical allergy specialist and kind of worked my way up through the ranks there. At the end of my allergy career, I was overseeing like 40 something clinics across 2 states.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. And working with a lot of doctors, a lot of allergy technicians, a lot of patients. It was, I really enjoyed it for the time that I was there, but I knew that it wasn't going to be my end all. And actually, it was in 2014 that I met my really good friend, Heather. We met through a social media platform. She was actually selling some stuff on Facebook, and I reached out to her and went over to her house, and we started talking and found out she was a captain at an airline. And I went, whoa, like aviation is relevant to my interests. And I know I've kind of jumped ahead because obviously I skipped the whole part about meeting Steve. And, he was a corporate pilot at the time, but he had gotten laid off in 2011 and we had not been in aviation at all since. In fact, when I met him, I originally, I had already done some discovery flights and wanted to actually continue flight training, but he had lost his CFI. He had let it lapse, and he wasn't really on board with it at the time. And so I chose to go to grad school instead of flight school. Yeah.
So that's kind of shifted. You were ready to, pull the trigger and get into aviation, but it all kind of shifted when, and I can understand, I've also let my CFIs lapse and it's kind of intimidating.
Me too.
Yeah. And Rob's in the same boat. It's kind of intimidating to kind of go, okay, I have to go and redo everything. And you really don't know. It's dependent upon whatever instructor you end up teaming up with. If your CFI lapses and you have it, but it's expired, what do you have to do? Is it going to be a couple flights and a check ride? Do you have to do, so many hours? It's really dependent upon the program that you find. So I can understand where that hesitation, I think some of our listeners might think, well, why didn't he just, go and do it? Why? But it kind of led you to a path where you really have a wonderful opportunity as a fallback, which we'll later learn is very important. But it kind of, so you're your direction went away from aviation into the clinical allergy specialist field. And then you met your friend Heather. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So Heather was a captain at an airline, and I thought, wow, this is relevant to my interests. You know, I've always loved aviation, always been interested in it. Even after Steve left aviation, I was always on YouTube watching videos. I mean, when my son was very young, we would do educational videos, and I'd always throw in an airplane video or two. I think they were mostly for me, not for him, but
nice.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I had this one video where they had Spirit airplanes coming in, and I was like, Mitchell, what color is the airplane? And he'd say yellow, and I'd say, you know, like
Good.
Definitely educational.
Yeah.
But so for the next 2 years after I met her in 2014, I mean, she was so great. She spent so much time with me, just pestering her and asking her questions. And I mean, I would just spend hours with her and just spending time with her. I mean, this girl was my age, and she was a captain, and she had this, you know, journey through aviation, basically the pathway that I had wanted to go, but I chose a different path. And, you know, she kept telling me, you just need to do it. You just need to go to a flight school, just go learn how to fly, just go get your private and see if you like it. And, but I wasn't sure how Steve would feel, because he had been out of aviation for so long, and I didn't. And it's not like he left aviation and chose to leave. He'd gotten laid off. And in 2011, there really weren't any aviation jobs. And so,
yeah, that was a rough year.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, exactly. And so it was kind of like, well, I just didn't want him to get resentful or anything. I actually took his feelings very much into consideration. But after 2 years of pining, longing, and pestering Heather, an opportunity arose. In October of 2016, he asked me what I wanted for Christmas. And I said, well, actually, I think I want to learn how to fly. And to my delight, he was on board with it. He was like, okay, cool. Let's see how we can get this done. And we started talking a little bit. And so he even told me, he was like, cool, you can go fly for the airlines. I'll stay home with the kids. And I was like, score, you know, like we started looking at flight schools. We looked at some of the surrounding, you know, flying clubs, and we found the AeroValley Flying Club. And Steve basically agreed to reinstate his CFI certification. And by doing that, you actually have to go retake a CFI check ride. Doing a CFI check ride will reinstate all of your old instructor certificates. So he had to do that, and then join the he did that by joining the flying club, and then just going out and practicing from the right seat and redoing all the maneuvers and everything. And then as soon as he did that like on the 23rd of February, and then he took the next day off, rightfully so. And then on February 25th of 2017, I logged my first actual flight training hour.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Talk about a memory as well, to be sitting there. Now, that's got to be tough too, when you have a loved one that's instructing you. And so the gloves are off, I think, in that scenario. Was it difficult to get along in the cockpit and then have to go home and hear about it?
Actually, you know what? Not at all. In fact, there was really only a couple of times early on in that training where, you know, there was a couple times where I was really nervous. I was very, very timid, especially when it came to turbulence, traffic, and towers. I call them 3 T's, you know. And then of course, like the maneuvers, I didn't want to stall the airplane. I was terrified. I mean, I was learning in a 172, and everybody knows, you know, you stall the airplane, especially on a power on stall, that wing drops, you know, and that was very, I'd never experienced that before. And so there was one time where I was so scared, and he got really frustrated with me. He's like, the airplane's not going to fall out of the sky. And I was like, why are you yelling at me? And, but afterward, we basically said, okay, stop. You know, in the cockpit, we are, instructor and student, and we are not husband and wife. And then we would debrief afterward. And so, I think honestly, and I told him this several times, he was actually harder on me than he was with anybody else. for a few reasons, but he wanted to make sure that when he put his name in my logbook, it meant something. Nobody could look back and say, oh, Steve, you know, he was easy on you. Or like, I was not going to go into a check ride, you know, and fail. Like I was going to be ready to go.
Ready to roll. Nice.
Exactly. He was very hard on me.
And the fact that you recognize that and can appreciate that, it speaks volumes to your character as well, I've got to say. Because those instructors that are a little harder on you and you think, God, you know, just lighten up, you know, but there's a reason for it. And the fact that he was hard on you is actually very telling as well. Yeah,
he definitely didn't let anything slide with me. And by the time we actually got to my instrument training, I started partnering with other instructors as well, because around this time, even though Steve had said, I don't want to live out of a suitcase anymore, I don't want to be a professional pilot, our presence on the local social media pages started to grow because I was just so excited about being part of aviation. Like I was no longer an observer. I was, you know, part of it. Yeah. I had also gotten involved with the AeroValley Flying Club. Shortly after joining, I asked the president if I could help in any way or get involved. And he was like, well, we've never had a social director. And I said, cool. And within 3 months of starting that role, we doubled the membership of the flying club. And so we needed
amazing.
We needed more airplanes. We only had 2 airplanes in the club at the time. We needed 4 now. And so Steve and I started looking around for an airplane. And true story, I actually wanted a high wing because that's all I knew, you know, up to that point. And I was right about 4.5, almost 5 months into my training when we found the Warrior. Steve wanted a low wing. I wanted a high wing. We actually compromised and said, okay, we'll get a Cardinal because it's a high wing that flies like a low wing. But then we found the Warrior and it was beautiful. And I thought, okay, well, this is intimidating. I don't know how to fly that airplane. I only know how to fly a 172, but it's a love story how we got to that airplane and how we wound up buying it. And so it was meant to be. We flew her home and I did my private pilot check ride like 2 weeks later. So it took me 5.5 months of training. And this is also while working full time and having a family. So, but I was so committed. Like I was determined.
Is that it right there?
That's it. There she is.
There it is.
That's my girl.
Very nice.
Yeah. Do you want to hear the story about the airplane?
Of course.
Sure.
Okay. So I didn't want the airplane at first, you know, but Steve was trying to convince me to buy an Archer because it was a 180 horsepower low wing. And he kept telling me, once you go low wing, you'll never go back. And I was like, whatever, just give me my high wing and let me fly. Well, then he kept sending me articles on low wings. And then we came across the Warrior on, it wasn't Barnstormers. It was one of the other, websites, airplane selling websites. And I looked at it and I thought, wow, this is a really pretty airplane. It's my 2 favorite colors, blue and another shade of blue. It, had a pretty basic panel, but it was good looking, standard 6-pack, dual VOR, DME, and an ADF. I was like, heck yeah, And then Steve reached out to the seller and the seller actually told him, well, the airplane's about to come off the market because I've just promised it to another buyer. And I was actually kind of heartbroken because I was like, wow, that was a really pretty airplane. Even though I didn't want a low wing, like something just drew me to it. Well, about 2 weeks later, Steve calls me when I was at work and he was like, hey, do you still want that airplane? And I was like, wait, the Warrior? Yeah, the Warrior. It's like, dude, don't play with my emotions. It turns out that what had happened was the buyer that was going to buy it could not secure financing. He was a student pilot and he was trying to get the financing. His finance company would not finance the airplane because they were missing logbook number 1.
Oh.
Well, our finance company said, we're cool with that as long as the logbook number 2 goes back at least 25 years. Logbook number 2 started in 1992, which was exactly like almost to the month 25 years.
Oh, wow.
So we were like, okay, that's great. So we got everything set up in escrow, got the financing. The night before, Steve and I are airlining up to Seattle to go test fly the airplane and then subsequently fly her home. The seller calls us and says, guys, you're not going to believe this. He was in the hangar digging out all the stuff to give us for the airplane and found logbook number 1, which had fallen down behind his filing cabinet.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we got the full logs on the airplane.
Nice.
Yeah. So we went.
Meant to be.
Exactly. We went, test flew her, loved her. And then over the course of 2 days, we flew her across the north, to Rapid City, and then down south the next day, down to DFW, where she lives today. So
very cool.
Yeah.
It's almost like they have a life of their own.
I'm telling you, it's crazy. So that airplane was definitely meant to be. And then just kind of on a joke, one of our local air traffic controllers at Denton called it the Wong Warrior, and the name stuck. And so ever since then, I mean, she's been affectionately known as the Wong Warrior.
And she's famous as well.
Do you all use that as a call sign when you guys check in with Denton?
Sometimes Wong Warrior 51 Whiskey. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And whenever we do a flight of 2, it's always Wong Warrior flight of 2,
Right on.
Oh,
yeah.
Have you converted to low wing, or you still, have the affinity for the high wing?
So I do have an affinity for the 172s. I have a lot of love there. Honestly, though, guys, I'm kind of an all-wing person. Like, give me an airplane and just let me fly. But I think the reason why my airplane became so well known is because I took this basic airplane. I mean, it's a Warrior, right? Yeah. But I just hardcore fell in love with her, and just with aviation in general. And I literally anthropomorphized this airplane and just put her out there. And because of that, people were like, started noticing the airplane everywhere, and her popularity spread. So I wound up doing so I started my instrument training, and that's where I branched out using other instructors, because Steve started, because of our social media presence, he started getting offers to fly corporate airplanes again. So he started getting back into that, and I started having to use other individuals. And I actually wound up meeting one of my best friends in the whole world through that process, Kevin. He joined our flying club, and then I was like, hey, I need some commercial training, or I need whatever. And so he would start helping me with that. And then one of my best friends, Marcus, he wasn't a flight instructor, but he was like, I'm always down to go fly, like if you need a safety pilot or whatever. So I've met some really, really great friends, through this process. In fact, all of my really close friends now are all in aviation, that I met through this process, except Heather, of course. Cool. Heather's the OG,
There you go.
Her and I are still close today. So
it's amazing. And we've said this now for years here on the show, is the aviation community is one of the smallest communities on the planet. And what I mean by that is you never know
oh my gosh,
you're going to be flying with next, or who's going to be your chief pilot next, or, it's a very tight-knit community, and we all have that passion, which is a little different than I think other professions. I think other professions, you have a career, you have a job, you have an income. Unfortunately, some people, that's all they can say. Oh yeah, I've got an income. We have a passion. And with that passion, when you see someone else, the only other time I ever saw anything like this is back in college. I used to ride a motorcycle quite a bit. And it didn't matter who you were, didn't know each other. You always waved, gave the heads up to the other rider.
Oh, you ride a motorcycle? I ride a motorcycle. Oh, yeah.
That's it.
So that's the only other time I've ever seen that kind of just unsolicited, hey, what's up? But in aviation, it's something else. And the fact that you found that in a very short period of time, and you acknowledge it and are really welcoming it into your life and your lifestyle, It says a lot. You did all your ratings in just under 2 years.
Yeah, well, almost just over 2 years.
Just over 2.
Well, so not including my ATP, I was getting I did it was like every 5 months I was getting a new rating basically, or a new certificate. So it took me 5.5 months for my private, another 5.5 months for my instrument. It took me a little bit longer. It took me about 6 months for my commercial single. And that was because the Warrior also went down for an annual, the first annual. And I do owner assisted annuals, or at least I try to. So I was very, very involved in that. And because of that, I took I took my training back for a second. But then as soon as she came back up, I really hit it hard. And then it took another 2 months for my multi-engine commercial add-on. And then 3 months after that, I had my CFI. And then 6 months after that, I had my double I. And that's the reason why it took me so long between my double I and my CFI, is because I actually, in December of 2018, I did one of the scariest things I've ever done. And I quit my allergy job.
Wow.
To go into aviation full time. And that was truly most scared, I think, at that point in time in my life. I took the MCAT, I did, the commercial maneuvers. I did all the scary things, but this was truly scary because I was leaving my comfort zone, my good stable job with the good paying salary and everything I knew and had worked up for a decade, basically at this point.
Yeah.
I get it. I totally get it.
I was getting ready to do my CFI check ride. And it was like, I talked to Steve and I was like, all right, if I do this, you've got my back, right? And he was like, yeah, we both agreed that it was a good move. And so I quit my job and I got a job as a contract pilot, just flying contract. And then I was like, all right, I get my CFI and now I've got options to flight instruct. And that's basically what I did for the next 9 months is I contract flew, and very sporadically, I didn't flight instruct a lot. So not at first. And then that summer, when I was approaching about 900 hours, I think I had accrued at this time. That's when I started looking around and I was like, I need to make a decision. Am I going to go corporate or am I going to follow the airline path? And I kind of worked backwards. I said, well, what is my end goal? My end goal is the legacy airlines. And I said, what is the easiest path or not the easiest, but what is the most logical pathway?
The most efficient. Yeah, I think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so I actually had 2 interviews within a week of each other. I had an interview at a 135 carrier corporate. And then I had an interview at a 121 carrier through their cadet program. And I got, I had to make a really hard decision. And ultimately I decided to do the 121 carrier because it allowed, it was getting my foot in the door to the airlines to get to the legacies in the future. Yeah. And I thought, you know what, this is the way to go. So I joined that carrier. And at that point, I was literally thrown into flight instructing. I went from flight instruct maybe 10 hours a month, give or take, to flight instructing about 100 hours a month.
Ouch. Yeah.
Because I had to go to a flight school. I went to a 141 flight school as part of the cadet program. And then, it was just, so from that point on, it was just nonstop flying for the next 6 months. And I was coming up, it was February of 2020. And I was coming up on my 1,500 hours. And I already had a class 8 for the 121 carrier I was going to. And I thought, you know what, if I time this just right, I might be able to hit 1,500 on the 3-year anniversary. And so I actually had to throttle back a little bit for those last couple of weeks. But I was actually able to make it work. I got it to where I was 2 hours away. I had 1,498 hours. And I literally, Steve was not happy. I drug him out to the airport because I was like, I really want you with me. This is like a huge deal.
Yeah.
And he wasn't happy about it, but he reluctantly came along and we flew for 2 hours and I hit my 1,500th hour on my way back into Denton. and told the controllers what I was doing. So they actually pegged it like exactly where I was on my 1500th hour and sent me pictures and stuff later.
Oh.
And so, yeah.
The fact that you were able to kind of think of that, and a lot of us go, oh yeah, and you're counting every 0.1, you're like, oh, when do I have it? And the fact that you were able to coordinate that is pretty impressive. You've really become a kind of a breath of fresh air in your local community, in your aviation community. Yeah. You've got a social media presence there. You've been featured in the local paper more than one time. And during this entire process, when you were doing your flight training, you ended up meeting Dan Millican. What can you tell me about that encounter?
So I joke that I accidentally became a YouTube celebrity. It's not something that I ever wanted or planned for or, thought of in my, career. So as I was getting ready for my commercial CheckRide, you guys know my social media presence started growing. Dan had just started the Taking Off channel a couple months prior. He reached out to me and said, hey, I would like to do an episode of Taking Off with you in the Long Warrior. And I thought, okay. I mean, I was so hyper focused. I joke that, some women turn into Bridezilla. Well, I don't, but I do turn into CheckRide-Zilla. As I come up to a check ride, I start getting hyper focused. And so I was a nervous wreck and everything, but he really wanted to do this episode. It was a hot summer day. It was in June. And we went up and we just flew around. It was a lot of fun, but I definitely wasn't as loose as I normally am in terms of I was very focused on that check ride. Well, Dan said, hey, I tell you what, if you pass your commercial check ride, I will give you your first paying commercial job. I will hire you to do some aerial photography with me. And I thought, oh, that's nice. Well, 3 weeks later, I did pass my check ride. So he reached back out to me and he was like, hey, let's go fly. Let's do some aerial photography. And we did, and he actually paid me for it. So Dan Millican gave me my first paying commercial job. And then
right on.
It was a week or two after that, he reached out to me again. He was like, look, I'm thinking about doing a web show called In the Hangar. And I would like you to be my co-host. And I was like, oh, okay. What are we going to do? Film this in your mom's basement? I didn't really think of it. And so I talked to Steve about it and then decided, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and check this out. And I showed up to the studio and I was like, oh my God, this is a legit thing. So what a lot of people don't realize is that Dan actually owns a production company and, production and film, that's his primary career. And the thing about us, the reason why we work so well together is he's film and production first and aviation second, whereas I am aviation first and then film and production second. So there's a good balance there.
Balance. Yeah.
And he really liked my personality. And aviation, all of this stuff has kind of become a passion project for me because I just love it so much. I'm so happy to finally be here after longing for it my whole life, And I think that was really shining through my social media. And so we started filming, and man, that first season, the first 2 seasons, I think were rough because we were still learning as we went, what is the dynamic of this show going to be? And then about the 3rd and 4th season, we really got a hold on it. And we just finished filming season 5. Those episodes are now coming out every Friday on our YouTube channel. And it's interesting, Dan and I had a talk about a year ago and I said, what can I do? What can we do? And he said, honestly, just stay with the show. That's really what the show needs is it needs your balance. He could do the show by himself, but it wouldn't be the same without that balance, Yeah. And I thought about it and I was like, yeah, I love doing the show and I'm going to keep doing it as long as we're doing it for, I've been given this really unique platform to which I can help people and I can, send a positive message. So I say I use my powers for good, not evil. Yeah. I use that platform to help people. I'm an EAA Young Eagles pilot. I specialize in doing discovery flights for people of all ages. I say I do old eagles as well as young eagles. You know, I mentor and encourage others. I get sent fan mail and names and questions all the time. And I always try to take at least an hour or two each week to try to answer people. I get a lot of stuff that gets sent to my junk folder. I apologize if I don't always get to those, but, you know, I really do try to keep a positive presence in aviation, and just because there's a lot of negativity out there. And I mean, I've seen it, I'm not immune to it, but I also try not to participate in it.
Yeah.
And listening to her rattle off all those things, I sit here and I think to myself, and I'm looking at my calendar for the day and I'm like, I ain't got nothing going on.
How come Tony always brings on people to make us look bad, Rob?
I know.
He's always bringing on people to make us look bad. Well, I took the MCAT, and I was a teacher, and I was a clinical allergy. And then in my spare time, I started flying, and I founded a nonprofit organization. And now I'm an airline pilot. And what do you guys do?
I just watched Beavis and Butthead about an hour.
No, you didn't. No, you didn't. Your IQ just dropped, my friend.
Sure did.
Well, so it's interesting. You brought up my nonprofit. I did. Yes. In my community, Lantana, Texas, in 2016, a fellow neighbor and we co-founded Lantana Cares. It's really interesting. Lantana is actually not a city. There's no mayor or anything like that. It's unincorporated Denton County. And so there's little pieces that get broken off and taken care of. Like the HOA takes care of this subset of things. The freshwater supply districts take care of this. The electric company of all places, they take care of this. And then the county is supposed to take care of this. But there's all this like little, things that get lost in the shuffle. And so we decided to take matters into our own hands. And it started as a small trash cleanup. And then we saw kind of a bigger purpose there. And so within about 3 months, we actually, we used our own money to fund paying for the lawyer to get the 501c3 going so that we could ask for grant money. And then we started getting grants. And then within a year, we started getting more money. And then we got a board of directors put together, and I serve as the president. And we actually we took over the Lantana Educational Foundation within the last couple of years. And that was a big foundation that the builder of the community originally, they started, but now the builder is moving out of the community because they're almost done building out. And so they wanted to just either scrub it, get rid of it, dissolve it, or whatever. And we said, no, this money actually does a lot of good for the community. We'll take it. And so we spent a year it was a lot of legal and accounting and everything, but we took that over. So now we oversee that. And we do beautification projects all over the community. We do a lot.
I've been to Lantana. That's a beautiful community up there. I mean, I've looked at buying a house up there a couple times, and for whatever reasons, we never really purchased up there, but man, that's a beautiful area.
Yeah.
It really is.
There's a lot of
certainly. Now I know why it's so beautiful.
Well, it was beautiful before I got to it, but like for example, we so like the HOA built the brand new North Community Center, and then Lantana Cares sponsored all of the outdoor beautification of it. So it would have just been basically a building, but now it's a lot more than that.
Yeah, nice, very nice.
Now, and how did you meet Bill Featherstone, the co-founder here? Was he just your neighbor, and you guys decided, let's start a nonprofit? I mean, how does one do that?
Yeah, sort of. We met at a community event, and he was like, and I was actually, so I'd become part of the Crime Watch. I was actually a volunteer. It was the Volunteer Sheriff's Office, the VIPS program, Volunteers and Police Service. I had done that in like 2015, 2016, because people were hating on the police, and I was trying to get the police and the community to like be, more amicable with each other. So I was trying to do a lot of community events. And basically I was trying to be a gateway. Like I was trying to network between the two. And so we met through a community event. We started talking, and then he started talking about the trash cleanup thing. And I was like, sure, why not? And it just kind of went from there.
Wow. I mean, that must be, I mean, you mentioned how much work it was to get the whole thing off and running, but now that it's an established organization, I see their Facebook page, Lantana Cares, really highlights all the good that you've done for the community. But does that take a lot of time out of your schedule, especially your flying schedule?
It used to. In the beginning it did, and that was just really the setup and getting it going and stuff. I mean, I was out there like every other weekend doing stuff, but it started really, it started go on autopilot, pun intended. And then as I got more people involved, they started helping. So it was no longer just Bill and me doing everything. We actually had a board that was helping out. And so now I really just help oversee everything, and make sure that it's running smoothly. Make sure, I attend the monthly board calls and things like that. But fortunately, I was able to still attend a vast majority of the meetings. I think I missed a couple here and there, but
yeah. And we here on the show very much support the Thin Blue Line. So I want to thank you for all the work you've done and to support our law enforcement community. It's quite a job, especially in these times where especially the media, the 5M, would love to sensationalize all the wrongdoings. But that's such just a little thin gray hair amongst all the good that happens every single day. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we'll be right back right after the break. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back from the break. Well, we've been sitting down here finding out about the journey of Christy Wong and how she went from, educator to in medicine to a good, stable job. And she threw it all away for her passion to fly airplanes for a living. But we didn't quite get into the most, at least for me, the most exciting part of her journey, which is some of the more recent parts. She mentioned the cadet program, which we've had the Legacy Airlines and our sister company, American Airlines cadet program recruiters on the show before. So if you haven't checked that out, go back and check out the episodes where we have American Airlines cadet program recruiters that give a really good information about the program itself. We had a couple cadets on the show as well that day. So kudos to them. But here at Legacy Airlines, we have a similar program. And Christy went through it and she got a job at an airline that we affectionately call Sandpiper. Now, that must have been exciting to have all this time, the struggle, the passion, the conviction to get this career moving, and you get the call. And they say, come on in for an interview. Bring us back to that day. What was that interview like?
Oh man. So I actually did the application and they called me the next day and they said, we would like to interview you. Cause remember, this was in 2019, pilot shortage. And here I was like a 900-hour pilot, and they were like, absolutely, come in for an interview. So I got set up for an interview like right away, like the very next week. And I was so excited. I went in and it's like a group interview. And then it's an all-day event almost. And they pull people aside to do individual interviews. They do an HR portion, and then they do a technical portion. They put you back together, you have lunch, and then they start pulling people aside again to either offer you a job or whatever. And they offered me a job same day. And so I not only got the job offer, for the airline, but then as well as the cadet program. So I had to go upstairs and meet with the cadet people and then get onboarded there. I had already reached out to the flight school I wanted to work at, knowing that they participated in the cadet program. And so I went in for an interview with them, got the job offer the same day, and just kind of put the paperwork all together. It took a couple of weeks, actually. I did all the interviews and stuff in August, but because of paperwork, fingerprinting, FRIA, all of that, I actually didn't technically start until the second week of September. And then it was hit the ground running. And like I said, for the next 6 months, I just flight instructed. And then after flight instructing, I'd go jump in the Wong Warrior and go fly.
Build that time.
I would grab a friend because it's always better flying with friends. And we'd go to Oklahoma City, we'd go to Mineral Wells, we'd go to Grant, just go build time and experience, So that was my life, my crazy, crazy life for about 6 months. I still managed to squeeze in filming 2 more seasons of In the Hangar. And then, like I said, hit my 1,500 hours on the 3-year anniversary of my first flight hour logged, and then went right into the ATP CTP course. Immediately, I think I had the weekend off. We had a club event that weekend that I hosted. And then that Monday, that's when I started NDOC. And that was on March 9th of 2020.
All right. 2020.
We all know what happens after that.
Yep. So we are a class of 24 pilots. We're super excited and eager to be there. And we got through NDOC. I was in the first half of the training group. They had to split us up. There were so many of us. What they do is they split you into 2 groups. The first group starts systems that week. And then the second group is sent home and then brought back the following week. So they're just a week offset. Mm-hmm. So I started systems, and 3 days later, they shut everything down.
Oh.
And by that, what I mean is that all future classes were told not to come in. Yeah. Now, my class, because we had already started systems, they kept us and they got us all the way through training. So I got my type rating in the jet, my ATP. I finished training, but unfortunately, just because of the circumstances, we never got to finish IOE. So we sat on the ground and just waited we really didn't know what was going on. And it wasn't just my class. It was 2 or 3 classes ahead of mine were in the same position, finished training, and then never got to finish IOE.
Yeah.
And then, unfortunately on October 1st, we were furloughed. So
did you ever even start IOE?
Mm-mm.
So you've actually never even got to fly the actual aircraft.
No, not technically. I did a lot of, but you know me, you don't know me. You know me now. I am very on top of my game, and I did not want to lose that proficiency. So every other week I was in the jump seat doing observation flights,
that's good.
Going somewhere, whether it was a Colleen turn or, going up to, Lexington or whatever. I was in the cockpit. I was, trying to keep my flows and everything else sharp. So that, I was ready to go, come on, coach, put me in. I'm ready. But then the consolidation period came and went. And then we knew we were going to have to go back to the sims. But then when we got furloughed, we were told, well, you're going to have to go back through long term anyway.
Yeah. Well, and there's a very important point that you're making here that I really wish more pilots at the beginning or the start of their careers would pay attention to. You mentioned you were proactive. You were using your jump seat privileges while you had them in order to sit in the jump seat and observe. And we all know that the jump seat is the wide angle vision of what's going on the flight deck. The fact that you took the time to stay in the game, to sit in the jump seat, to watch the flows, to watch the flight operation, to get comfortable with the SOPs or the standard operating procedures, the call outs, the flows, the trigger events. That's crucial. That's monumental. When I was an instructor, I used to have every single one of my students, regardless of where they were in their training, they had to at least observe 2 flights with other students that I had. When I became a check airman, the company at the time over at Sandpiper, when I got hired, they had a rule where you had to observe 2 flights from the flight deck prior to IOE. And usually what they did is your IOE check airman captain had a first officer for their trip for the week. You would go and observe the first 2 legs, considering we're a hub and spoke system at the time. It was easy. It was an out and back. And then that scheduled FO would go home with pay. And they were just real happy. They're like, oh, yeah, thanks. You can sit in my seat now. I get to go home and get paid. Good luck. And then you would get in that seat, and that would be your first time at the controls of a jet. You were type rated, you were FAA licensed, that was fine, but it was your first time in the jet, and you had 50 passengers or more in the back. So it was relatively intimidating, and basically you're hanging on by the wing or the rudder for probably the first 2 legs.
Static wicks.
Yeah, until you get
you're
kind
in the back lab.
You're pulling yourself up to the flight deck, and by the 3rd leg, you're actually can keep up, and that's normal. That's part of the process. I ended up being a commuter right off the bat, so commuting to and from work, I couldn't sit from my location in Los Angeles to Chicago on the jump seat of an Embraer 145. It simply wasn't going to happen. So I ended up commuting either on a 737 or an Airbus, sometimes on a 757 on another carrier. And whenever the opportunity arose and they said, well, you can sit in the cockpit or you can sit in the back, which one do you want? I was always cockpit, please.
Yeah.
Because not only was I watching how the professionals at the main line do it, right? Or the major. But I was kind of getting into that rhythm, because it doesn't matter if you're flying a Saab or a Q400 or a 777 or a 787. The procedures might be, or the nuances might be a little different in the procedures, but the gist of it, the foundation, the meat and potatoes of it all is the same. The professionalism, the call outs, they're all the same. So I really felt that gave me a leg up. The fact that you had the tenacity to say, I'm not just going to go home and gloat about potentially being furloughed here with what's going on in the world with this pandemic. I'm going to actually keep in the game because I want to be there ready to go the minute the whistle blows. So, my hat's off to you for that. That shows a tremendous amount of maturity to want to do that. So, good job.
And so we got furloughed, but then we were paper recalled, I guess you can say, in December when the PSP, the payroll support got reinstated for us, or I guess extended. They brought us back, but we weren't given back all of our credentials. So unfortunately, I am not able to jump seat until I actually get put back into training. And, but they told us that even though we were getting recalled, sort of, we're not really recalls, we're kind of in pilot purgatory. They said, if you got another job, you can keep your job. Well, what I've been doing since I got furloughed is I've been flight instructing and I've been corporate flying again, just contract flying whenever I can. I'm SIC type rated in the Citation 500 series and also in the Lear 45. And so every now and then I get a trip that I'm able to go on, and I know how to fly those jets really well. So I'm very, very fortunate. I know that compared to my brother and sister pilots, I am very fortunate. Not only that, I'm an aircraft owner and I'm part of a flying club. So as part of my use my powers for good motif, I've extended myself to say any other furloughed pilots that are in the DFW area, if you want to go fly, send me a message. I've now taken 4 furloughed pilots up for flights that haven't seen or touched an airplane since we got furloughed. I had one guy recently, and every single one of them, they're so giddy. I just absolutely love it. They're like, oh my God, it's a real airplane. And I mean, we took off this last time and he was like, we were flying. You know, he was just so happy to be back in the air as a pilot. I mean, these guys haven't flown in September, but they don't have access to airplanes like I do. So the guy before that was like terrified because he's like, I have a feeling they're going to start recalling us soon. And I haven't touched an airplane in 6 months. I don't even know if I know how to fly anymore. And so we went out and flew. And then I had him do the ILS going back into the airport. So I was like, hey, we'll just practice hand flying, you know, this course. And, you know, just stuff like that. Just trying to keep my brother and sister pilots flying, reminding them of that passion. Like, why did we get into this? I couldn't imagine. I think I would die a little bit if I couldn't fly, you know. I go a week because of Snowmageddon, and I'm literally like, you know, sitting on my sad little couch going clear prop because I can't, you know.
You know, I don't see your cape. Where's your cape? Because I don't
know how she does it.
No,
amazing.
Like the incredible.
Awesome.
No cape, no capes.
Oh.
Yeah.
I have wings, no capes.
There you go, wings. You know, you've mentioned how much you have a passion to really pay it forward, and your flight instructing. I mean, the fact that you were a high school teacher and an elementary school teacher and in medicine, and you have a scientific mind. I mean, it all kind of makes sense when you start to really put the puzzle pieces together. It's a beautiful, beautiful image. Some of the challenges coming up with being a flight instructor, I can remember those days, not that long ago, are plentiful. What do you think are the most common issues that you're seeing in this current market with student pilots?
So fortunately, my education background, because one of my degrees is in education, that really helped me with the FOIs and just being able to, you know, find different learning styles. So, it's not the learning and the teaching styles that I find the most difficult. When I was at the flight school, I taught with the Chinese program. So this was their full-time job. I want you there at 6 a.m. and they were there at 5:45. You know, I want this student at this time, this student at this time, this student at this time. The biggest challenge that I have now is that all of my students are Part 61. They're working professionals. Flying is not their full-time gig. They're working on an instrument rating just for fun or whatever, or just because they want to be a safer pilot. So like right now, I would say 90% of my students are like the 9 to 5, Monday through Friday working types. They all want me at the same time. So like right now, for example, I'm able to do this podcast with you guys because it's in the middle of a weekday. But I've got flight lessons tonight. You know, so I'm usually flying in the evenings and the weekends because that's when my students are available.
Right.
And also because of that, it's taking me longer to get my students to progress them through their training because, you know, like I've got one student in particular, you know, he's been working on his, I mean, I've actually got a couple of them. They've been working on their IFR stuff for like a year and a half. You know, just because they fly maybe once a week, sometimes once every 2 weeks. And then, you know, whereas before my students, I could fly with them every other day, easy. And I had one student recently who works from home. And so he was able to be more flexible with his schedule. I mean, we were flying 2-3 times a week and I banged out his instrument rating in 4 months, you know?
Wow.
That's great.
So honestly, and the thing is that like more people want to fly with me and I want to fly with more people, but it just depends on what their schedule availability will allow.
Yeah. So schedules is really the
honestly,
biggest hurdle.
Because I feel like I've been able to break through and I have found, I mean, I'm always learning myself. I am not the end all be all, but I am a Gold Seal CFI. I have had one failure of a student on their first check ride. And that person got reverse sensing on the VOR when they were doing a missed approach and got confused on it. And the DP busted this person. And so now, but that was a learning lesson for me. I need to focus more attention on normal sensing and reverse sensing. And so now I do that. And I haven't had students have an issue with it since, but every student, every check ride, every lesson is a learning opportunity for me as well. So I take in that knowledge and then I apply it to future lessons or to future students. And I feel like that's really what's made me a good instructor, but it's going to make me even better in the future.
Now, for our listeners that don't know what a Gold Seal CFI is, what can you tell us about that?
You have to have, so in order to qualify for it, basically what it boils down to is you've got a high pass rate of students on a first-time check ride pass. So the qualifications are, you have to be a CFI, you have to have either your AGI, which is your advanced ground instructor, and or your IGI, which is your instrument ground instructor rating. I have both because I wanted to cover all bases, just in case. Yeah. But you have to have at least 10 student check rides within the last 24 months. And you have to have at least 8 of those students. You have to have an 80% pass rate, basically. So when I applied for my Gold Seal, I had a 90% pass rate.
All right.
Good for you. That's awesome.
Now, a common question I hear, and sometimes while we're on a flight deck, we're on a long flight, and the captain will look at me and they find out about the podcast because I tell them, and they say, "Oh, my son or daughter, or my nephew or niece are interested in getting into flying. What advice can you give them, or what direction should they go?" And it's kind of a hard question to answer because every individual student is unique. They have their own set of circumstances. But one of the common questions is, should they go with one of these flight schools that has all G1000 or now the G3000, or should they go steam gauges? I know what my opinion is, and I know what Rob and Roger feel about this. What do you think?
I'm 6-pack all the way. I think that you should learn with the basics first. And, I've heard of these flight schools, they teach in the G1000s, good on them, but you're also going to pay for it. And at the end of the day, you need to learn how to fly. And I've had people that learned on the G1000s and then they try to get into a standard 6-pack and it's so hard for them. Like they know the stick and rudder aspect of it, but they get so hung up on the avionics. Yeah. And, I get it, but at the same time, so I just this last fall put a Garmin 650 in the Warrior. Up until that point, like I said before, standard 6-pack, dual VOR, DME, and an ADF. Okay.
And no autopilot.
That's all you need. That's all you need.
Yeah.
No autopilot.
Yeah.
I did all of my instrument training in that airplane. Everything was hand flown on a 6-pack. I did my CFII training on that airplane. No autopilot, standard 6-pack. Nobody can track a VOR like I can. I jokingly say that. I'm sure there are people that are very proficient at it, but and then I put that 650 in there, and that opened up a new world of opportunity because now I can do RNAV approaches. In fact, when I first got the airplane in, I'm pretty sure even on VFR days, I was like, I'd like the RNAV approach, please, just because I could legally do it, but it opened up the opportunity for learning those RNAV approaches or being able to teach it. But I still take students back to the standard 6-pack. I really when I'm flying in an Aero tonight that's got a GPS, but I'm going green needles in that airplane, a good amount of time because I need you to know how to use it. What does green needles mean? What's the difference between it? How do you track a VOR? Let's do a VOR check. You need those basics, and you're not going to get that with a G1000.
Right. Yeah. And I'm glad to hear you say that because I believe that the stronger the foundation of your home, the more you can build upon it and the taller you can build it. The foundation is always in the most rudimentary principles of aviation. They teach this from your first day as a private pilot all the way through a legacy airline, wide body aircraft. When things get rough and things get out or off the rails, always bring it down to the lowest level of automation.
Click. Turn it off.
Click.
Raw data. Aviate.
Eyes out the window.
Forget the navigate, communicate for now. Aviate.
Aviate.
And to this day, if you start reading accident reports, which I know is your thing.
That's my thing.
You see this time and again where the pilots were overloaded. We've heard of the magenta line. We've heard of all of the complexities that it brings into the cockpit. Just on the last show, I was talking to Captain Elmore, who's 20,000 hours plus of aviation. 6 aircraft carriers he was on in the Navy.
Jeez.
Unbelievable guy. So I asked him the same question. It's like, do you feel that all this technology that's bombarding us with apps and EFBs and tablets and glass cockpits, they do bring in a level of situational awareness. They do bring in a lot of information. Sometimes that information can be overwhelming and we have information overload. Do you think those distractions outweigh the hazards that they pose?
I mean, absolutely. Sometimes number one, you have to know how to use them. More importantly, you need to know how to use them when things go wrong. If you don't, you're going to get hyper focused on the problem and you're going to forget to aviate. So like, those electronic EFBs that you talked about, the automation and everything, they are great as a backup to your aviator skills. But at the end of the day, you still have to have those skills. Another pet peeve of mine, if I may add to my soapbox, is when people try to buy high performance airplanes and then learn how to fly in them. Again, I'm like, bring it back to basics. Like, I know people like there's flight schools out there that teaching people how to fly in a Cirrus. I'm like, really? Like what happened to the 150s? What happened to the 172s? I mean, admittedly, I learned how to fly in a 172, but a 172 and a 152 are fairly comparable. Get yourself a basic Cherokee, or a 172 something. Like a 182, it's just going to take you longer to learn how to fly it because now you're adding in more complex systems. So like you said, build that foundation first. You've got to crawl before you can walk. You don't try to run before you can crawl.
Absolutely.
Yep.
It's funny you say, I'm sorry, Rob, go ahead.
No, I'll say very good advice. That's so true. Everything that you said.
And you said you go and take every opportunity to fly those green needles. We do that mainline as well. I'm going to Puerto Vallarta tomorrow. It's my 3rd time there this month. And
nice.
The controllers, there's a language barrier and they'll give you direct to a fix or they'll give you, do you have the airport? All right, you're clear to visual. Puerto Vallarta has an MSA around the VOR at 11,200 feet.
Awesome.
The runway elevation is 23 feet. So, the first time I went down there, the beginning of the month, the captain goes, hey, we could, it's your leg, do whatever you want. I was going from LA to Puerto Vallarta. He's like, they're going to clear you probably for the visual. But as you know, there's terrain. You've talked about it. You briefed me. But why don't we just do the VOR DME2 runway 22? It's the FMS autopilot. All you have to do is monitor it all the way down to final approach fix, and then you can click it off and land it. And it's an arc. It's an actual DME arc. You have to hit your altitude and speed restrictions, and you descend in the arc to final. And then, you turn final. Once you turn final, you can either let the autopilot take you down to MDA or you can hand fly it. And the view of the mountains and the canyons and the valleys. I mean, I'm sitting there monitoring,
distracting, but
I'm like looking around going, this is awesome. Look over there.
Yeah.
Everything is awesome.
Now I could have easily have just click, chop it, drop it, configure it and get it on the ground. No problem. I'm not a hot dogger. I mean, if I want a hot dog, I'll go, get a flight in the pits with somebody who's, qualified, take me up and let's see how long I last. But no, when I'm at work or flying just for leisure, that's it. I enjoy doing the things that we don't normally get to do. I have training coming up and I know Rob's in the same boat. It's like, hey, I haven't done a GPS approach in a while. Do you mind if we request a GPS, even if it's visual? Sure.
Yeah.
And then shoot the whole GPS approach. Keep current.
Yep.
That's great advice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally.
So tell us about your Aero Club.
So the AeroValley Flying Club was established in 2010. And for a long time, I mean, stayed right around 20 members. I think at one point they had 2-3 airplanes. When I joined, it had 1.5 airplanes and 20 members. I say that because one of the airplanes was consistently broken down, just a lot of maintenance issues and whatnot.
That's
of course
0.5.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. So I was flying the one aircraft, the 172, the one that wasn't consistently broken down. And like I said, within 3 months, of becoming the social director, we grew to 40 members, and now we needed more airplanes. Steve and I bought the Warrior, and then we brought in a 152 Sparrowhawk. One of our flying club members bought that airplane and put it in. And then they were closing the runway at Northwest Regional Airport, which is where we were based. We were called the AeroValley Flying Club because 52 Foxtrot used to be named AeroValley, and then somewhere along the way, they changed the name to Northwest Regional. So it was really a shout out to those early aviators that established the airport. It was a nod to them as to why that, our club was called AeroValley. But after they closed the runway, we started moving airplanes up to Denton, and then we started keeping airplanes at Denton. And within a couple of years, we had all 4 airplanes up at Denton. We grew to a 5th airplane, and then finally a 6th airplane. So now, just in the last 4 years, I've seen the club grow from 1.5 airplanes and 20 members to 6 airplanes and 100 members.
Wow.
And, I had this vision for the club when I became president. I just got elected for my 4th term as president.
Oh, congrats.
Thank you. And, when I first got elected president, or when I was running for it, people were asking me, well, what do you see for the club? And I thought, 6 airplanes sounds nice. 3 high wing, 3 low wing, 1 high performance of each. And so we've got a Cherokee 6, that's our low wing high performance. We've got the Warrior, Cherokee 180, and then we've got 182, which is our high wing high performance, and then 2 172s. They're slightly different models. But what's really great about our flying club as well is that there are different avionics across every single airplane. Mm-hmm. We've got a 530, 430 in the 6. We've got a Garmin 355 in one of the 172s, a basic 6-pack with an older GPS in the other 172. My airplane, the Warrior's got a 650. We've got an Avidyne in the Cherokee 180, and then a Garmin 430 in the 182. So similar but different, and each airplane's a little bit different just depending on the mission you're looking for. So you want to take the family on a long trip, take the Cherokee 6, or you want to load up with 4, an actual 4-place, 4-adult, airplane and go have lunch across the state somewhere, take the 182. You're looking to go to Stephenville for barbecue, grab the 172 or one of the 172s. It's a great $100 hamburger airplane. It's just, our club is made up of some really, really, really great people. We've had very few problems with membership along the way. Every now and then we come across, that trouble child. The biggest issue we had, of course, as I'm sure everybody's heard, is we did have a member a couple months ago decided to take not only the Warrior, but one of our 172s up for some aerobatic flights. So we had to take care of that. Yeah.
Big no, ladies and gentlemen. Normal category aircraft.
Yeah.
You don't do acrobatics.
Yeah, it's not even utility, I don't think.
Nope.
No, even in the utility category, the Warrior is not approved for spins even. It's certainly not approved for aileron rolls and loops and stuff. So, but, and people, I got a lot of support on social media and on our YouTube channel and stuff for it. There were some people, of course, that had their own opinions of either, well, Bob Hoover did it. Well, okay, this guy wasn't Bob Hoover, I'm telling you right now. Also,
Bob Hoover was also a test pilot.
Exactly. Yeah. This was a very low time, brand new private pilot. I'm just going to leave it at that. The other comments that I got was, well, this is why I'll never lease back my airplane to a club or a flight school. Well, that's great. Good on you. But you don't know my financial situation. And the whole reason why I bought the airplane in the first place was to put it in the flying club. And it's a way for me to give back to the community while simultaneously being able to afford owning an aircraft. Because I don't know if people know this, but flying is expensive. So,
Oh, yeah?
Right. So So, but it wasn't, if I just, for a split second after that happened, I thought about yoinking my airplane out of the club, but I stopped myself and I said, I'm not going to do that because we've got 100 members who are great and fantastic and treat my airplane like it's their own. I'm not going to do a disservice to them because of one ChowderHead. So
well said.
And in the 4 years that I've been a part of this club, this is the first and only time that anything like this has ever happened. So,
I watched your video on YouTube, and I've got to say, the passion that you had, the emotion that you shared with all of us when you found out and telling your story, I was sitting there, I felt it. I felt every little bit of frustration. I felt the disappointment in that individual, and the compassion that you had to not push it even further than you did. I think you handled yourself with dignity, and the fact that you sat there and used it as a learning tool to get the word out to maybe another person who's doing a lease back, or maybe that pilot that 3, 4, 5 states away that's renting an airplane, and his buddy goes, "Come on, let's do a loop," and they remember watching your video and they'll think, "Nah."
When the first day that it happened, it's funny. Another comment that I got was, "Wow, she's so dramatic," and this, that. The thing is, you know what? That's fine. Let me be dramatic then. That first couple of days that I found out was not good for anybody. I'll just tell you that. I was so upset.
Anybody would be.
Yeah. I'm not typically a crier. And man, I cried because I was like, are you freaking kidding me? Like this is ridiculous, especially in a time of furlough. I've got some life uncertainty things happening in my life right now. Like this airplane and this flying club is all I have left, is kind of what my mindset was at the time. But I called Dan that evening, Dan Millican, my co-host and producer. And I said, look, this is what happened. But I'd like to make some lemonade out of it because Dan and I are fascinated with the Air Safety Institute and the airplane crashes. And we had recently watched the Air Safety Institute video on the CFI out of Arlington, so also in the DFW area. Back in 2007, he was known for going up and doing these types of maneuvers in the flight school aircraft. And on one particular day, it was him. He took up his student and an observation student. They decided to go do some of these same maneuvers while doing a cross-country flight in a Piper Aero, so another PA-28, and the aircraft broke up in flight. And that really hit home for me because, we're talking, it's a Piper. Now, there are differences, obviously. The Aero's got retractable gear, and it was a T-tail Aero. But nevertheless, we're talking about a normal category aircraft. And when I found out that this person was doing the same types of maneuvers that this CFI had done, and then he not only lost his life, but the life of 2 innocent students just because he was hot dogging around, that really struck a chord with me. And so when I made that video, it was almost 2 weeks after finding out about it.
Yeah.
And so I had actually really calmed down at that point. It was, and to this day, like I joke about it. People make jokes with me about the Warrior going inverted and stuff. You know what? That's fine. Those are harmless jokes. I'm not going to get all twisted up about it. But my message was for anybody out there that was thinking about doing these maneuvers, it really is not okay because you're looking at the destruction of people and property, and you don't even know who you could be affecting on the ground. And it was one thing for this guy to go up and do this. He had a non-pilot passenger with him when he did this in the Warrior. And it could have been that, he may not have hurt himself or his passenger, but future passengers, other people fly that airplane. I just imagine what would have happened if we wouldn't have found out and he would have continued to do these things.
Yeah. So beyond visual, something you damage the airplane beyond a visual inspection, and you won't find out until the next, turbulence flight and the wing falls off. And
exactly.
Right.
I mean, and look at the Aero at Embry-Riddle in 2018. That airplane had obviously been overstressed. Some have speculated that the airplane was doing maneuvers that it should not have been doing outside of its normal category. And an innocent commercial check ride student, as well as an innocent DPE, got into that airplane for a normal commercial single check ride that day, and they both lost their lives because some chowderhead before them decided that it was cool to go out and do, maneuvers in this aircraft.
Yeah.
Or at least that's some of the speculation. It's, you just think about things like that. And the guy that did this in my airplane just didn't have the foresight to think about it. And that makes me really upset. So that's why I put the message out there that I did was this is not okay. And if you think it is, you need to reevaluate your life decisions, honestly.
Yeah.
Well, you also violated an FAR regulation.
Yeah.
So,
in addition to it just being illegal. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, like, totally. There it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's the Bible.
Yep. Well, hey, and that's the crazy thing is, I think everybody can agree here. Nobody wants to share. Not only that, nobody wants to share airspace with a guy that's going to be doing something like that, and I don't want to be in an airplane. That,
we've all flown with
that kind of stuff.
An individual like that. I mean, it's tough, but these are some of the conflicting personalities that you will come across from day one until the day you retire. If it's a 2-pilot operation, especially, you're going to have these conflicting confrontations. The question is, what's the best way to handle it? And that comes from your own personal comfort zone. How you
that's
feel
part
like
of the thing with younger pilots too, from a certificate standpoint. In this instance, it sounds like he was a newer pilot. And quite frankly, there is a lot you don't know as a younger pilot. I'd like to think, I certainly don't know anything about it, but I'd like to think that it was not that it's an excuse, but ignorance. You just don't know. I got my brand new wet certificate and now I can go do all this stuff. And unfortunately, you're just ignorant to the, what you had just brought up, Christy, is, all the stuff that goes beyond that. He didn't see, or he or she didn't see past what was coming next because they didn't know. And again, that's not an excuse, but that's part of, us as I don't know, senior aviators.
My attitude is there are plenty of airplanes out there to go do that kind of stuff in if you really want to go find out.
Exactly.
That's why mentoring is so important.
It's so important.
Definitely. You think that, well, I did my time and I went through my struggles and I've been mentored and I've been making good decisions and it's not my responsibility to reach out to the community. It's not if you're going to get in this, you should know this, but that is not right. That is not true. We're here because we stand on the shoulders of all the aviators that have helped us along our journeys. And we stand on the shoulders of the aviators that have helped write the rules and the regulations in blood. It's a very common theme. There's a reason for it. There's always the big picture. The running joke is the day you retire from an airline, you get called in a chief pilot's office and they give you the big picture. And it's like, why didn't you give it to me on my first day? Why do you have to wait till my last? But that's the way it works. So making good, sound choices, good decisions, good rationale, good pilotage, it is crucial in this industry. And if you don't have the maturity, don't do it. Go rent an airplane with an instructor so that somebody's in the cockpit that can override your bad decision making, because
pretty much
it takes a lot of responsibility to be a command of an aircraft, whether that's a glider, a hand glider, or a wide body aircraft. And it's a tremendous amount of responsibility, and that responsibility grows with the knowledge and the time that you invest into this profession. So thank you for sharing that story. Awesome. I watched that the other day and I was just so impressed, and I really felt bad for you and for the airplane. How much does that cost to get all those inspections done afterwards? I mean, that's really a factor that you're not mentioning because you're very humble and you're sincere and giving. Yeah. But I'd be pissed of the expense that now I have to go through to ensure the aircraft is safe, to do the inspections that it now requires. And in your video, you did mention, well, it was coming up on an annual or whatever it was inspection anyway, but that's not.
It wasn't even that. So my annual inspection actually isn't even due until at the end of May. She turns into a pumpkin on May 31st, but the we were going to be getting the wing spar inspection done. And it's crazy because we actually did the wing spar inspection. We just happened to do it on the same day that the FAA said, "Hey, your airplane is going to be required to do this." It cost a little over $7,000 in inspections. And because we did nose to tail, we tore the airplane apart, wings, tail structure, everything. We wound up having to replace the bolts in the tail. We did it for good measure, just to make sure that there was no overstressing. And then there's a Lycoming service bulletin for an overspeed condition on the engine. We had to do that, which part of that includes overhauling the magnetos. And because I still have gyros in my airplane, I'm on the waiting list to get the G5s installed later this year, but I still have gyros. And those were actually fairly new gyros, but they needed to be overhauled because gyros, without a cage, without that stop in it, they're never meant to go upside down. So those needed to be recalibrated. I mean, that's the thing is that people, when they want to do stupid stuff like this, they don't think about the implications of how it's going to affect the airplane now or in the future or people in the future. And so I wound up having to do just a crap ton of inspections and work on it to ensure that it was safe for not only myself and my, my son. I take my young
it's huge liability.
But also for the other flying club members.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Christy, what would you say to a young girl or boy, for that matter, who wants to become a pilot at a young age and hears all the negative proclamations from people around them, especially at a young age as an adolescent? What do you say to them?
If it's something that you really want, just don't stop at it. Go get that discovery flight. It's going to be hard. I wanted to fly. I mean, I was friends with a guy I went to high school with who got his private, I think, at the age of 17. And, I always envied him to a degree. But at the same time, it was like I wasn't in a position. I grew up in a really poor family, and there was no way I was going to be able to do that as a kid. But I never stopped dreaming, never stopped working. There's a saying that I've heard, and I love it. It's dreams only work when you do. And that's kind of what I took that to heart, and I've always carried that with me. And when people ask me, well, how do you stay so motivated? Because there are times that, you're going to look at this and you're like, why am I doing this? Especially on days you get furloughed and things like that. And the answer is, I don't stay motivated. I cultivate discipline. So that way, because when you think about it, motivation is very fleeting, right? It requires no work. It comes to you when you least expect it. But cultivating discipline gets you in good habits. It forces you to do something even when you don't want to do it. So there were days that I didn't want to fly, but I was like, man, I need these hours. I need to fly. I need to instruct. I need X, Y, and Z. And when I was done at the end of the day, I always felt so much better than had I just, stayed home.
Yeah. I learned that, I think, with running. Something I got into.
I was going to say with workouts.
Yeah. After I got to Sandpiper. I've told the story in one of the early episodes how I got into running, and I had a captain tell me, "You'll never wake up and go about your day, and at the end of the day, you'll never say to yourself, 'I shouldn't have gone running today.'"
Yeah, true.
But you will say, "Man, I should have gotten out the door." Or you get to the layover hotel, and my routine was I got to the layover hotel, I would turn any technology on, I would immediately change into my workout gear. I'd tell the crew, I'll meet with you maybe in an hour or two. I'll text you, and I'd go for a run. And I used to bid my layovers for the run and for the training. And I felt better. It allowed me to have a beer and not feel guilty about it.
Yeah.
In aviation, we talked about mentors and people and events that shape our decision making. What would you say has been the most significant factor in your pursuit for an aviation career?
Honestly, the sheer amount of people that have extended themselves to help me has been overwhelming over the last, 4 years. There are so many people that have helped me along the way. I could spend probably 30 minutes just going through and listing off people. People that just extended themselves. Hey, jump in this flight. Hey, you need to build some twin time. Come fly the twin with me. Hey, you're having a hard time with your landings. Why don't you just come fly with me? I'll show you how I do it. Just stuff like that. And when I was so fortunate to experience those things. I now am trying to give back, that same sentiment to as many people as I can, within reason, of course. So many mentors along the way. And even my mentees that I now get to mentor, they teach me things along the way, which is really great. Yeah. Having an open mind in this whole process and realize that I am a lifelong student pilot. I may be an ATP, but that doesn't mean I know anything,
Yeah. Learning every day. The day you stop learning is the day you should hang it up, because that's going to make you complacent, right?
Yep.
Which brings us to some of the biggest challenges that aviators have to contend with in their progression on their journey. There's some easy ones we can pick right off the bat without even having to get to know you. Which is, look around, look outside. There's a lot going on. But for you personally, what have been some of the biggest challenges that you have to overcome?
It's weird. Like, people ask me how I feel about like women in aviation and getting more girls in aviation. And I'm certainly grateful to the women that came before me who paved the way. I have been really, really fortunate to have not experienced, at least in this early stage of my career, I haven't experienced a lot of discrimination being a female, but I have experienced some. I was denied a job as a contract pilot just because I'm a female, because the individual before had poor experiences flying with other females. I mean, this person doesn't even know what my abilities are or my skill set. He just blankly said no. And so I was denied an opportunity to even prove to him that I'm a good pilot. So there is that. Other challenges, early on in my career, there was overcoming the nerves, or even now, getting in a new airframe. I learned some new airframes this last year, of course, with the jet that I got my ATP on, as well as the Learjet and the CJs and whatnot. Every time I step into a new airframe, there's a little bit of nervousness there. Like, okay, Chris, don't screw this up. And it's not the flying ability of the airplane. It's like where everything is, that the hardest part of flying an airplane for me now is the avionics. But, during flight training, it was the maneuvers. It was accelerated stalls in a Piper Aztec. Those are a little unnerving when you first do them, or power on stalls in a Cessna, things like that. But I think the biggest thing that I learned through that was just keep pushing through. It's not about going outside of your comfort zone. It's expanding the zone itself so that now you're still within that zone. It's just your zone is now bigger.
Very well said.
Not giving up, just continuing that pursuit. If I didn't do something every time I was nervous or scared to do it, I certainly wouldn't be in the position I am now. So I was, my best friend, Kevin, he took me out once in the Warrior, and he's like, he was talking about stalls and falling leaf stalls. And I was like, falling leaf stalls, that does not sound fun. And so we went out, and he showed, I remember that first time we did falling leaf stalls. Oh my Lord. I was so nervous. I was hanging on to stuff, and because I didn't know what to expect. And the airplane's just oscillating and all over the place. And we're going down at like 2,000 feet a minute, just almost straight down. But then I was like, okay, I did not like that, but let's go do it again. And so he kept taking me up and doing it over and over again. And now I demonstrate falling leaf stalls with my students. And in addition to that, I was in a jet last fall, and the PIC wanted to take me out and just get me used to the airplane. It was a new airframe for me. He's like, most people don't get to stall a jet. We're going to go out and we're going to do steep turns and stalls and emergency maneuvers in the jet. And I thought, okay. And so we went up and I actually got to stall a jet. And it's not a normal, stall like you would in a Cessna. It is a falling leaf stall, effectively. And so I got to do that. And I was like, oh yeah, that was super easy. Because I'd been doing it, but that's because my comfort zone, the zone itself had been expanded. So I was now able to perform those maneuvers.
Yeah.
Nice.
No, that's a very well said statement, to expand your comfort zone instead of pushing outside of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I learned something new today.
Totally.
That's awesome.
There you go.
So far, I already know the answer to this one, but what's been your favorite aircraft that you've flown to date?
The Wong Warrior.
Hey!
That airplane, look, for so many reasons, not just because she is mine, but the PA-28 in general is just a solid airplane. It's like the 172, it's just a good solid airframe. But man, you throw tapered wings on a Cherokee, and it just the maneuvers and the capabilities. She is so docile and forgiving when it comes to maneuvers and landings and everything. To me, it's the perfect instrument trainer because, in a 172, you sit up kind of high and you're overlooking the nose, and it's almost difficult to throw on foggles and keep everything covered up. But in a Piper, in the Warrior, you're sitting down lower and the instrument panel's higher. You get that different sight picture. So now when you put the foggles on, it really blocks out that view. It's much harder to cheat,
Yeah.
It's just such an amazing aircraft. And, people have asked me, what's your lotto airplane? And I always say, well, step one is pimp out the Warrior. She's getting a paint touch up. I'm going to do the buff and wax on her, get her the upgraded tires. And then maybe I'll get her like an older sister or new, bigger sister, like a Malibu or something,
Oh, nice.
So you'd go like a Malibu or something, just a little
in the
more,
Piper family, probably.
a little more horsepower.
Just a little. Maybe if I win the lotto, depending on how big it is, I might go Meridian. So
oh yeah. Yeah.
Get a little bit of a single turbine PIC in there,
So you wouldn't go vintage?
How much money have I won? Because if
100 million.
Ooh, okay. So yes, I would probably go like old school Cub. You know what I'm really interested in though? I am such a dork. I love super, super old airplanes, like the old Jennies, like 1914 style airplanes that like, they didn't even know what flaps were. I would be at Osh a couple of years ago. They were recreating an old like a Camel's, the Sopwith,
Sopwith, yeah.
And I thought, you know what? That would be really, really cool. Like, I want to see this thing fly because I want to fly it. They were replicating it based off the old plans. But the stuff like that, like, I think that would be really interesting just to get into some of those early models. But like a 1940s Cub would be kind of fun.
Yeah.
I think I want one from every decade, just to round it out.
You have to have your own museum.
I just might actually. So if I won $100 million, I did something really, really well. And I think I deserve an airplane from every decade.
Well, I don't know if you can afford every decade. But, I always wanted, and I think is it an Electra? The one that, it's like a float plane. Howard Hughes used to fly it around. What was that?
Okay.
Is that a Lockheed maybe?
Yeah, I think so.
It was a big float plane and just a high wing with the rotary engines. Oh, yeah.
You know what?
Like
and I think too, like, I definitely want to get all the certificates and all the ratings. So seaplane, doing it. Glider, doing it. If money's no object here, why not just throw rotary in too, just for good measure? I've always been a fixed wing girl, but if I've got money and money's no object, I think I could splurge.
Yeah. I don't know about those Robinson 33s or whatever they are, man. That's a lawnmower.
I would get one of if money's no object, I'm getting like one of those bigger Bell helicopters.
There you go.
Know?
Oh yeah, like the Airwolf style.
I'd love to. Oh my god, absolutely, dude. Full on.
Straight up, I'd paint it like Magnum PI, man.
Dude.
Full up red or whatever.
Yeah.
Exactly, with a Hawaiian shirt and everything. I'm doing all my flight training in it.
There you go.
Yep. Exactly.
Right on.
We've really gotten to know you here. And I still can't really put my finger on what you would answer on this one.
Okay.
What's your biggest pet peeve in the cockpit?
No.
Biggest pet peeve? Okay. Overstimulation of the rudder pedals is a big one when the airplane starts twerking and fishtailing. That's a big one for me. So I've had to teach students before the smooth coordination of the rudder pedals, or when I'm doing like discovery flights or doing checkout flights with new club members, and they're used to flying jets and not GA, and they don't remember how to use the rudder pedals. That's always fun. Radio work is a big pet peeve of mine. I'll say.
What specifically?
If you don't know how specifically.
Like non-standard phraseology kind of stuff, or?
I mean, it depends on what it is. Okay, here's a good one for you. Not being concise on the radios. And obviously, no offense to the airline guys, but like I've heard some of the airline guys come on before and they rattle off a 30-second message. And for me, I'm thinking like, okay, here's a story for you. So I'm flying a Citation a couple years ago, and the captain and I, we're trying to go from Georgia to Denton, and we got rerouted all the way up into Oklahoma. And because of storms and metering into the DFW airspace, and this poor Fort Worth Center controller is just putting people into holds one after another, trying to get people, rerouted, doing whatever. This guy from a particular legacy carrier comes on and rattles off a 15-second check-in along with a request. And my captain and I just looked at each other like, wow. And the controller was so funny. He's like, well, thanks. It's not like I'm busy on the radio or anything. Tell you what, slow to this airspeed and hold at this fix, at 14,000. And I mean, he literally just put the guy in a hold right away. It was so funny. Honestly, situational awareness on the radios. I would say that's probably my biggest pet peeve is whether, and it's hard to teach a student. So I've given a lot of grace, but I try to use it as a learning opportunity for my students. Don't call ground when you've just heard ground give an IFR clearance to somebody else. Wait until that airplane reads back their clearance and ground is done talking before you call ground, stuff like that. Or people, students stepping on each other all the time because they click over to the frequency and immediately start talking. They don't wait 3 seconds to figure out whether or not somebody's talking already. It's just stuff like that. I think that's my biggest pet peeve.
I
That's
agree.
a common thing going on right now, right, Tony?
Yeah.
With the air route traffic control system, a lot of controllers are working multiple frequencies.
Yeah.
And, you'll hear the controller say something to somebody and there's no response. And, we know now that he's talking on multiple frequencies.
Yep.
But some guys will just come in, they'll flip the switch, and as soon as the switch is flipped, they're, push to talk. And you're like, dude, he's talking to 15 people.
Yeah.
Right.
Blocked.
Wait your turn.
I can't stand it. And it happens more often than not with super senior pilots at legacy carriers. I mean, I flip the switch on a frequency change if I'm the pilot monitoring or however we do it. At legacy, when you're at cruise and the autopilot is on, the pilot flying is flying, but they're also changing the frequency on the radio control panel and swapping it over. And the pilot monitoring, which in my case would be the captain, he doesn't have to lean forward from his reclined position, which is standard. He can just talk on the radio. I hit the switch. He looks down, verify I did it right, and then he'll talk. Now, I'd say 90% of them do the technique that I was taught at a very young age, which is you never talk within 10 seconds of hitting that push to the swap button. So you hit the swap button and you wait, and you make sure that you're not interrupting somebody's call. There's nothing that's that important unless you're dealing with an emergency that you have to talk within 10 seconds. So you wait, and you wait, and then you talk. And then you know you're not interrupting anyone. Or if you heard a transmission, wait. Maybe you're going to block somebody's response. That could actually create quite a problem, especially if you don't know what's being said. And most people don't realize.
Most people don't realize if the controller needs to talk to you and you haven't said anything yet, he's going to call your call sign and be like, "Hey, Legacy 123, are you here?"
Right? They have your script. They know you're there. Yeah.
In some airspaces, you don't even get the chance to check in. Like, what is it like Atlanta
Chicago.
Center? Yeah, exactly. You switch frequencies and then you're waiting and then they'll be like, Legacy 123, are you up? Or, sometimes they just assume
or they'll just give you your clearance. Cross at 1-2000. You're like, all right, we're doing that.
Exactly. So, but yeah, I think honestly, what it boils down to me is it's just consideration of other people. It's the way that I drive. It's the way that I fly. It's the way that I talk on the radio. It's such a basic courtesy, like situational awareness for that though. Just, and sometimes I unintentionally step on people because like you said, the controllers are on multiple frequencies. And so sometimes they'll be like citation, stand by. And then you hear him talking, but that's not because I wasn't considerate. It's just, I didn't know.
Right.
Yeah.
But honestly, just basic human consideration.
The golden rule. Treat others. I mean, you don't want to be stepped on, so don't step on someone else.
I don't want to step on people.
Yeah, it's the little things. Yeah. Here's another one.
Okay.
Logbook, paper, or electronic?
Both.
Oh. Why both?
I'm just that type of person. I like to have a backup for my backup. I like to keep my paper logbook because it's got all my endorsements. And honestly, it's very sentimental for me as well. It's got all my memories and stuff like that in it, but it's not super practical in like, okay, I'm going to come home tonight and log my 3 flights or whatever. So I do keep an electronic logbook that I literally after my flight, I go in, boop, boop, boop. It takes me 10 seconds to log a flight. And then I transpose them into my paper logbook at a later time.
Yeah. And Rob?
Yeah. Well, I used to be paper. And I used to get those little red, logbooks that I used to buy. Yeah, the pocket one. And, after so many flights a day I just got so far behind on that stuff. And I think I had like 15 of those books, and I would normally transform them into my master logbook, my professional one. And that got overwhelming. So then I got the electronic one that they used to do at Sandpiper, where it automatically take the Sabre stuff and throw it into your, I don't know if they still do that, but that was great. And then print that off, and I just kind of fold the thing up and put it in my logbook. And that was, the second logbook. And then I stopped doing it.
Yeah.
So I have nothing now. I just use the one that the company provides us electronically.
Yeah, the union. I started out with my student pilot logbook, my little blue one, the Cessna, the John and Martha King Flight Training Center.
CPC course, yeah.
Yeah. It's
the student pilot special.
Yep. Yeah. So I started with that. I filled that up. And once I got my CFI, I bought one of the professional, I think it's a Jeppesen.
The Jeppesen one I have too. The brown one.
The green paper.
Yeah.
That's what I've got.
I'm on my
fold the corners.
4th one of those. I too carry the pocket one, and in the airplane, I'll fill out like the tail number and whatnot, because that's kind of hard to go back and find later. And I'll put in my destinations, flight hours, and I'll total what I did for the day. For each page is 1 day. I'll write down the captain and the captain's employee number. So I've got a log. And then about once a month or once every 2 months, I'll sit there on a flight and I'll bring my big logbook, and I'll sit there with the tray table and I'll just kind of fill it out in the middle of the conversation or whatever.
Tray table,
Airbus guys.
I was going to say,
Airbus
you and your
guys.
fancy Airbus
I don't know how people did it before that.
tray table.
That thing's open
I'm jealous.
unless I'm doing
I'm
takeoff or
jealous.
landing. That thing is open, and I'm just, I got all my notes and
I joke, but I would love to fly the Airbus someday. So
yeah.
I can't even say
I'd like to
anything.
too.
Well, come
I'll
along
be
on a jump seat one day.
Dude, as soon as I get my privileges back, I would love to.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll show you how real pilots do it though in the 737. So
I like how you said real.
Yeah.
7-3. Yeah, you'll get rug burn from those trim wheels on your knees.
Yeah, keep away from
Watch
that.
your knees.
Yeah.
I'm trimming.
Clear trim.
Oh God. Yeah. You know how many chiropractor visits I've gone to because of that jump seat on the 7-3? I've got rivets permanently indented from falling asleep against that panel right there. Thank you.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah. I know.
I get to stand up mid-flight and stretch my legs every once in a while.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
Just saying. We're starting a feud here. Thank you so much for letting us in on some of your pet peeves, and I think we all we share your sentiment. I think radio communications is actually quite important, regardless if you're just starting out. I think I took that course. Say Again, I think.
Yeah.
It was like an online thing. Great. There's so many resources out there. I know AOPA has just a tremendous amount of resources on their webpage. Speaking of AOPA, recently in the hangar interviewed the CEO and president of AOPA. How did you guys manage to get him in the studio?
We were very nice. We asked nicely. And we are huge advocates of AOPA because AOPA is a huge advocate for GA aviation, or general aviation. So they were more than happy to come and speak on our platform and really just promote it, because a lot of people, we get asked all the time, is AOPA worth it? And if you've ever tried to fly general aviation anywhere other than America, you would know that the answer is yes, absolutely yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the insurance services, if you're a student pilot and you're renting aircraft at a club or you're renting aircraft at a flight school, that a couple dollars a month or whatever it is for their renter's insurance, well worth it, because deductibles are high. And if the owner of the aircraft, deems you're the one at fault for the cost of the repair, if you are unlucky enough to have a necessity for one, man, those services are phenomenal.
Well, they've got legal services. They've got a med line that you can call and speak to somebody about medical. And their services are so far reaching, and they're available to, all pilots. And so why not?
Yeah. So many benefits that how can you not do it?
Yeah. It's like less than $100 a year. So is AOP worth it? Absolutely. To keep us flying? Definitely.
I've been a member since 1999, I believe, or something pretty close to that. It's very well. It's kind of like having a union before you're at a mainline carrier. You have all the services that a union would normally provide once you're at a 121
support
operator.
and all that.
I'm part
information
of the club.
And support.
I've got the hat.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Hey, opa.
So as we kind of wrap it up here today, a couple of final thoughts. If you can go back in time for just a moment and whisper in your younger self's ear, what would you tell yourself?
Just never give up. Keep flying. Don't stop. Somebody recently asked me if I could go back and change anything, would I? And I said, no, actually. The only thing I might have done differently is I would have started flying in 2014. I would have gotten in a couple of years earlier, but because then maybe it would have prevented me from getting furloughed. But at the end of the day, I've also gained a lot from being furloughed as well. And now I get to say later on in my career that, I was furloughed. And the things that I learned from it and how I carried myself during that time. And who knows, maybe I'll get to be one of those, older, bitter airline pilots. I joke about that. I would not. I will know now, though, for future generations, what it's like when furloughs are imminent, because it'll happen. This industry is very cyclical. And I'll be one to step up and say, hey, I'm willing to take a 10% pay cut to save my brother and sister pilots if that's what it takes.
Yeah.
Nice.
You know, there's a lot of learning from this experience that I would not have gotten had I not been furloughed. It's a really unique position to be in. And I don't think that the pilots out there that have never been furloughed, you can't truly understand or appreciate the position unless you've actually been in it.
Yeah.
So, not that I'm glad that the furloughs happened, but if it was going to happen to anybody, you know, let it happen to me, because I'm still in a position that I can take this time as an opportunity to continue giving back to my community.
Yeah.
Nice.
Versus when I go back, I'm going to be on standby reserve for the rest of
in Chicago.
Well, it's not going to last very long because, you know, if you go onto any of these aviation websites, you see, pilot shortage. So those articles are starting to, you know, hit the
come up again
print. Here in the last couple of weeks and couple days. I really think this, at the beginning of this pandemic, we were talking about how this wasn't going to last very long. Obviously we were wrong. But I do believe that we were correct in the fact that when this does come back, the floodgates will open and the demand will be so high. You're just going to be throwing darts on a chalkboard or whatever it is.
Yeah. One thing that's not going to stop is retirements. You know, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
So
and the demand is
when
you
have that, you're going to have people, you need people to fill the shoes. Even if the airline shrinks, you know, there's still people retiring.
Yeah.
You always need to fill the shoes. So,
and you raised a good point as well, as we had the puppet Captain Roger Victor on the show not too long ago, and you know we've been following him for quite some time. We love Captain Roger Victor, his Armani pilot suit. He doesn't do that outfitter stuff, and he did post not too long ago something on Twitter that really stuck with me. And the reason it did is because the conversation was had with myself and some of the other pilots that I have had the privilege of flying with over here at the Legacy Carrier. And he said something to the effect of, if you think just because you went through a furlough after 9/11 and you came out okay, that those that are going through furlough now are going to be just fine, there's something wrong. You're not okay.
Exactly.
You know, you're not okay, because no one should have to suffer and go through that with their career, the stress, their family, their income. I mean, it's tough. And the fact that you have such a good attitude towards it is very refreshing.
Yeah. Here's the thing. Like, I've had my moments. I have certainly had my moments of, wow, this really sucks. You learn to embrace the suck, because at the end of the day, if I just curled up in a ball and wallowed around in it, I mean, I would be so mentally unhealthy, you know?
Yeah.
So I've tried to, like I said, use this as an opportunity. I try to stay a positive person anyway, but I didn't come out, I have not come out of the furloughs and out of 2020 unscathed. You know, I've got, there are some things we talked about offline that I'm kind of going through right now. And I've got a little bit of life uncertainty going on, but I'm choosing to maintain a good attitude about it. But it doesn't mean that it's okay. Like it's devastating to look at it. I mean, we're still contractually obligated to our airline, so we can't really go anywhere else. So our options are very limited.
Yeah.
You know, and I've been really fortunate. I've been so fortunate. The decisions that I made in the past and the decisions that I continue to make have kept me afloat, fortunately, but not everybody's as lucky. I've seen stories of people that have had to break their contract, pay back their bonus, and go somewhere else, or move out of state, or move out of country. You know, just so that they can support their families. When we got furloughed, we lost everything. We lost our healthcare insurance, our paychecks, everything, you know, and that's not easy. So I did see those comments about, oh, well, you getting furloughed, you know, you're just paying your dues. What a terrible thing to say.
Absolutely.
That's horrible. Yeah.
You know, it should be, you know, that message should be, hey, you know, brother, or hey, sister, I know you're going through this. this sucks. I went through it too. Let me tell you some of the things that I did to get through it.
Exactly.
Not you're paying your dues. What kind of message does that send?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said.
Very well.
You know, I know Tony and I have daughters, and, you know, seeing, you know, successful females in the industry is awesome, you know, and no wonder you're doing so well. And, you know, considering the situation that you explained, you know, you're just really, really, really amazing.
It's funny.
Thank
You
you.
own a warrior, but you are a warrior.
Yeah, exactly. Well said.
With that irony, I was going to say, like, people have asked about the Wong Warrior, and they've thought that I was the Wong Warrior. So, yeah, I was like, no, that's my airplane.
I think you need to find a way
I'm just an FO.
Use that, the Wong Warrior.
Yeah.
I think
Wong
it fits.
Warrior and the Wong Warrior too.
Yeah, there you go.
So final thought here and final question.
Okay.
Think back to a person from your life that has made the greatest impact to your success in aviation and in your career. Who would that person be? Why? And what do you want to say to them?
Steve. I want to thank him for all the times I woke up at 4:30 in the morning and drug him out to the hangar so that I could fly, for the patience that he had with me during my flight training. And even where we're at today, you know, he still continues to be a big supporter of me in aviation. He wants to see me be successful. I have nothing but really, really good things to say overall about my flight training experience with him.
Yeah. Yep, I can see that. So
Awesome.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to you, Christy, for, you know, all that you bring to the community and to aviation. You're an inspiration to countless young aviators out there and old alike. You know, as a Gold Seal CFI, that is quite the accomplishment and a testament to your instructor ability and the passion you have to make sure that your students have a successful outcome. The fact that you manage and are president of the AeroValley Flying Club, all the time you put in there, I know that those 100+ club members, you know, absolutely appreciate the work you do. You know, we loved watching you in the hangar episodes and taking off episodes that you do with Dan Millican. Really good stuff. I mean, I know I'm going to go back. You have a lot of episodes. I was watching one earlier this morning. You know, you just were flying around and you're talking on the radio, and man, all the ATC controllers over in Denton, they love you, man.
Yeah.
It's awesome to hear.
Awesome.
You can hear the excitement in their voice with the communications they share with you. So, you know, congratulations, you know, and the community of Lantana, Texas. I mean, to start up and manage a nonprofit organization that gives back as much to not just the community, but the younger people in the community, all the parks and organizations and that you're involved with. It truly is an inspiration. And when earlier Roger, you know, sat there and did a, you know, throw his hat on the floor saying, damn, you know, you make me feel like I'm a chump, you know, basically. You really do. And when I said, wow, I mean, I think that sums it up.
Thank you.
So congratulations. Thank you so much for being on the show. Is there anything else you would like to say or
No, I mean, thank you guys so much for having me on for my first podcast. This was quite a delight. I think you guys set the bar pretty high. So
thanks.
And I'm happy to come on future episodes.
Yeah, I was absolutely going to say I would love the opportunity to spend time with you on air here and talk about aviation. It's something that clearly, you know, all of us are very passionate about. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank the frontline workers out there, the doctors, nurses, pharmacists, EMTs, medical techs, firefighters, law enforcement, grocery store employees, truck drivers, Amazon workers, and of course, all the airline employees that show up every day to work to provide the essential and safe service that they do. We're finally kind of seeing TSA numbers every day that are over 1 million. This is great news. Very grateful, and I'm really hoping that, Christy, you get back on the line at Sandpiper as soon as possible. And we are here for you. If you have anything that you just have a question about or something we can help with, we're there.
Yeah.
You know,
and make sure you have your resume in off the street for American. Somebody like you would get picked up in a heartbeat.
Make sure you put on their, been on the podcast for Squawk Ident too.
You got it.
Yeah.
It's on the resume.
Well, if you're enjoying Squawk Ident and you really like what you hear, please make sure you follow the show and share it with a friend. Take a moment, if you're on Apple Podcasts listening to this right now, at the end of it, send us a review. That really does help us out with the standings in the Apple Podcast community and wherever you listen. Tell a friend, and also, we love to hear your feedback. Check us out at aviatortony.com. That's Alpha Victor, the number 8, Romeo Tango Oscar November Yankee.com. There you can leave us audio feedback, send us a quick email about show topics or anything you liked or didn't like about the show. We also have photos from the flight line over there. We have our Squawk Ident pilot shop where you can order t-shirts and hats and mugs and all kinds of cool stuff. And we have the guest book photo tab where some of the photos from our featured guests from the past have been posted up there. So thank you so much for all that you do in supporting the show. Finally, you can contribute to the show financially right there on the homepage. And just give whatever you feel the value of the show is for you. And a lot of you out there are getting flying lessons, so we totally understand. If the only value you can give us is your feedback and a good review, that's fine by us. Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram users can search for us under the Squawk Ident podcast. One final thank you to Christy for coming over onto the show today and sharing her wisdom and her journey with us. We do appreciate it. Thanks again.
Welcome.
And thank you for taking the time to listen to these grateful aviators. Keep the dirty side down out there. Be safe and take care of each other. Bye, y'all.
Take care.
Thank you.